we don't have supply chain backups, about the 8,000 jobs that Hyundai is going to be bringing to Georgia, 3,000 jobs to Texas from Samsung, $17 billion investment, Toyota, 1,700 jobs in North Carolina on battery technology, the situation where we've created over 8 million new jobs.
What are your thoughts on this, everybody? Do you think that President Biden should do more for the American people and send out stimulus checks sooner than later? Tell me what you think in the comments below. A $2,000 fourth stimulus check, there's a big update on that. Lawmakers are considering a bill that would send more one-time relief payments to millions of people. This will be a huge boost to many people. California lawmakers could soon push a one-time California child tax credit to low-income families. This will be a measure supporters say will help families and children living in poverty. And there is a bill that was introduced, and the legislation would utilize the state's budget surplus to provide a one-time $2,000 California child tax credit per child, ages 17 and younger to families that earn $30,000 or less. And under this bill, a family with children ages 0 to 5 could receive $3,000 per child, $1,000 of which would come from the state's existing child tax credit. After Congress did not pass an extension of the expanded child tax credit, Biden administration's American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit was extended from $2,000 to $3,600 per dependent. Now, many people are saying this bill is going to be a game changer. Supporters of the bill told lawmakers that more than 100,000 California families with children and half of workers without children currently receive a California earned income tax credit of less than $100. Advocates have said that increasing tax credits is one of the most effective ways of defeating poverty. Here's some news on inflation, everybody. Jerome Powell emphasized his resolve to get inflation down, saying he will back interest rate increases until prices start falling back toward a healthy level. During an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Powell said if that involves moving past broadly understood levels of neutral, we won't hesitate to do that. We will go until we feel we're at a place where we can say financial conditions are in an appropriate place. Earlier this month, the Fed raised benchmark borrowing rates by half a percentage point, the second increase of 2022, as inflation runs a 40-year high. Powell said following that increase that similar 50 basis points moves were likely to come at ensuing meetings, so long as economic conditions remain similar to where they are now. Powell repeated his commitments to getting inflation closer to the Fed's 2% target and cautioned that it might not be easy. He also said that it will come at the expense of a 3.6% unemployment rate that is just above the lowest level since the 60s. The U.S. economy saw growth contract at a 1.4% pace in the first quarter of 2022, but tighter monetary policies has added to concerns about a steeper downturn and has sparked criticism in addition to the 75 basis points in interest rate hikes. The Fed has also halted its monthly bond buying program and will begin shedding some of the $9 trillion in assets that is required starting next month. Big changes have just been confirmed by the federal government, and the IRS is now warning American people that they may have to return some stimulus money. Over the last 2 years, millions of people in the country were financially given aid from the federal government in the form of 3 separate stimulus checks. If you received the full amount for each payment, it came to $3,200 in crisis relief. The last check started arriving in households back in March 2021. But it turns out, not everyone was supposed to keep the money.
And Rich and I showed up, we found that we had hundreds of thousands of borrowers who were eligible to have their loans discharged because they were disabled. They were still paying on those loans. We've now discharged those loans. We had hundreds of thousands of borrowers who claimed they had been cheated by a for-profit college. We've discharged hundreds of thousands of those loans. We have more in progress. And the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which made an important promise to young people that if they spent their careers in public service, we would make sure those loans would be affordable and they would be canceled after 10 years. But only 7,000 people had ever received public service loan forgiveness. That number is now up to 130,000 with more than 1 million receiving progress toward cancellation thanks to some of the changes that Rich has overseen. So we're working really hard on the challenge of student debt. We're also calling for new investments in Pell Grants, free community college, similar to some of the work the governor has done here. Stronger protections against colleges that leave students with loans they can't afford to repay. A new repayment plan that will be much more affordable for students. So it's an all hands on deck effort here to do whatever we can within our power to make sure that loans are affordable and that people aren't left with debts they can't afford. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a really important part of it. It's very important to President Biden. And I'll ask Rich to talk a little bit more about the changes that he's implemented there and some of the progress that we're making. Thank you.
James, thank you. Amen to all of the above, and we share the exact same passions and priorities that the President and you and all the colleagues at DOE share. Please give the Secretary our best, by the way. With that, let's turn things over to the Chief Operating Officer of the Federal Student Aid Program within the Department of Education, Richard Cordray. Great to have you, Rich.
Thank you, Governor Murphy, and thank you, James. And we have developed a really strong partnership in the Department of Education between the Undersecretary of Higher Education's office.
Finally, new stimulus checks worth up to $500 will begin going out to low-income households in just a few weeks. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are now under pressure to increase monthly benefits for all current recipients, everybody. And now the Democrats are changing the price tag of the next fourth stimulus package, so you want to be sure to continue watching this video to never miss out on the most important stimulus check information. Missouri residents who file income taxes would be eligible for a $500 tax credit under a new Republican proposal the Democrats are currently negotiating. The proposal by the Republican House budget leader would set aside $1 billion in state funding for the tax credits. Married couples filing jointly would get under $1,000, and top House Republicans said passing the tax breaks would be the main priority as lawmakers near their deadline to finalize the legislation. Nancy Pelosi and top Democratic House speakers said in a statement that Republicans do not support the idea of spending every available dollar to increase the size of the government, but instead believe that individual people in Missouri are the best decision makers for how to spend their tax dollars. Now, a few House Democrats criticized the measure as a tax break that wouldn't help the state's poorest people in the state of Missouri. Democrats had proposed setting aside $100 million to give $1,000 checks to poor families who have struggled with housing or food insecurity. Republicans voted that measure down, and St. Louis Democratic representative said the Republican proposal is similar to his previous pitch for stimulus checks, but has the inverse impact. The representative said that Missourians know the difference between a stimulus check and a tax break, so House Republicans should be ashamed of this proposal. Do you agree with the Republicans or the Democrats on this? President Biden and congressional Democrats are facing pressure to boost federal crisis-related unemployment benefits for millions of people as the crisis continues to surge and job growth slows. There have been a total of 3 federal jobs aid programs. The programs that were first put in place by the former president's administration lapsed months ago. At the time, an estimated 7.5 million unemployed workers lost their extra jobless benefits. According to estimates from the Century Foundation, an additional 3 million people stopped receiving a $300 weekly boost to the unemployment benefits that are provided by their state. Economists and advocates are pushing Democrats and Republicans to pass legislation that will boost unemployment benefits. On May